Hello and welcome to another episode of the Dongfang Hour China Aerospace and Space News Roundup. This for the week of February 1st to 7th, 2021. I'm Blaine Curcio, joined as always by my co-host John DeVille. Before getting started, we would like to send a special shout out to our good friends at Go Taikonauts and Spacewatch.global, two excellent sources of space industry news. Also, a special thanks to my grandmother, who's letting me use her basement and internet connection for this episode, and that also probably gets us one more YouTube follower, so that's good, I'll have to say, the basement background. This week, we're going to give updates on a couple of Chinese commercial launch companies that have had some significant events over the past week, some policy updates from the Beijing municipal government, and also some news from China's Mars mission.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are honored to welcome you aboard the Dongfang Hour. Please make sure your seatbelt is securely fastened. Thank you.
士们、先生们，预计空中飞行时间2小时15分钟，我们预计在当地时间下午6点25分左右到达。
Our first piece of news this week comes from iSpace, also known as Interstellar Glory Space Technology, one of China's leading commercial launch companies. On Monday, February 1st, the company attempted the second launch of its Hyperbola-1 rocket, and the launch attempt ended in failure, with both with anomalies in the first and second stages of the four-stage rocket. iSpace is noteworthy because in July of 2019, they became the first commercial launch company in China to successfully orbit a rocket with the Hyperbola-1's maiden flight. Over the past couple of years, they have been in parallel developing, further developing the Hyperbola-1 and also developing the Hyperbola-2, which is a larger rocket. So a couple of I guess, noteworthy points about the launch. So first, you notice from a couple of photos taken that there were some fairly significant modifications made between the first launch of the Hyperbola-1 and the second launch over the course of that 18 months. So the failure was seemingly not on a rocket that was, fully similar to the previous one. Also, a little bit noteworthy is the timing of the launch. So iSpace about 2 weeks ago had a very, very brief announcement that was made by the authorities at the Shanghai Star Board, which is kind of China's tech stock market, talking about the company wanting to file to do an IPO on China's Star Board. And so it's not entirely clear whether this failed launch is going to impact their IPO plans. But most probably, given that iSpace is still probably the most advanced or one of the most advanced commercial launch companies in China, they're still probably a hot commodity. And this is particularly true given the number of IPOs that we're seeing in China right now, especially in the tech space and in areas that are kind of favor to the government right now. And so I don't necessarily think that the launch failure is going to have a major impact on their IPO plans. I would just close out and turning it over to John here by saying that I think that the launch may, however, provide a window of opportunity for land space or potentially even galactic energy or one of a couple of other launch companies to really kind of jump out and take the lead as the kind of undisputed leading commercial launch company in China. So as we've mentioned on a couple of different episodes, there are a lot of launch companies in China, and several of them are kind of quite a bit older, more established, a lot more funding, a lot more employees, and they're all kind of jockeying for position as the sort of most advanced. And iSpace, by virtue of having been the first commercial launch company in China to successfully launch a rocket into orbit, that really speaks volume. Land space had raised more money at a certain point, but it's like, well, if you're the first, you're the only ones who have gotten a rocket successfully into orbit. So again, with this setback, it's possible that another launch company will be able to kind of jump ahead in this race, but it is still very much a multi-horse race, and we're probably only 1/8 of the way through the race. So we are not even close to the final furloughs, if I will end the horse racing analogy there. Jean, anything from your side on the iSpace launch failure and related developments?
I agree basically with both of your points. I think that it's just a temporary setback. I do agree that this probably opens a window of opportunity for the rocket companies, and probably the ones that come to mind are the companies that are also building a similar, solid fueled, small rocket, expendable rocket. And so typically Galactic Energy, which launched their first, the Series 1 rocket for the first time in November last year. Land space, perhaps not so much, because they did sort of shelve their Tianwen-1 rocket, and you can have a listen to our episode 6 of Dongfang Hour where we interview Kevin Xu from OneSpace right on that topic. It could also benefit maybe companies like Deep Blue Aerospace. So they're a company that's specifically focusing on liquid-fueled rockets, but they have a Nebula 1 rocket that's expendable, that's light lift, that has similar payload capabilities, and so typically these other second-generation companies could also benefit from this slight setback from iSpace. But I agree with you; it's definitely a temporary setback. iSpace is one of the companies that has commercial launch companies that have the best reputation, notably in terms of their core technical teams, also their financial backing. They raised, I think, forgot the exact amount, but I think it was somewhat around $200 million US. And yeah, I think globally, what will be defining for the company is not really this failure, or just not even the Hyperbola 1, but more or less how the Hyperbola 2 test launches go. And so we know that in 2021, this year, they're planning to do hop tests. And then potentially, if that all goes okay, they would have the first orbital launch of the Hyperbola 2. So I think that is really what everyone's focusing on, as well as how their competitors are doing for that category of launch vehicle.
So just one last point about iSpace, and I will open this to any of our viewers or listeners because I have not had time to do so much digging before this, but I did notice on their Hyperbola 1 rocket that they attempted to launch on Monday, it was Chinese characters, but it was not really Chinese characters. So I mean, it looked very much like Chinese characters, but they weren't actually characters, and so I suspect there's a story there somewhere, but it was kind of it looked like it may have been taking different radicals that were not normally put together and made. But Jean, did you? I don't suppose you had done any digging or anything. And again, if any of our audience members have been looking on the Chinese internet and found any information on this, welcome to put it in the comments. But and we'll post a photo as well, just for any cryptologists out there. Jean, had you come across anything about that or?
I think I think it had a payload that was linked to an artist called Xu Bing, and maybe the painting, all the characters, the fictional characters that are on the rocket are linked to that. But yeah, we can confirm that in the show notes.
Yeah, we'll have a look around, and again, if anyone has come across anything on that, always welcome to speak up. That would be excellent. So moving on to our next piece of news, an important meeting from the Beijing municipal government that has involved a couple of policy updates related to space. So last week we saw the Municipal People's Congress so I guess first just a very short clarification. So in China there are 4 cities that have sort of provincial level control, which basically means that they're sort of like a state amongst themselves. They have their own kind of state government and they have a rather higher level of power than any other city. So these 4 are Beijing, Shanghai, Chongqing, and Tianjin. And so Beijing was having its Municipal People's Congress of the Beijing sort of municipal level, provincial level city just this past week, where the city's leaders discussed basically key tasks for the upcoming 1 year and then also some points for the upcoming 5-year plan period, so 2021 to 2025. And so some interesting figures and also a little bit of a review from the last 5 years. So a couple of headline kind of more macroeconomic figures. You had the Beijing government targeting 6% economic growth for the city in 2021, as well as below 5% unemployment rate and 3% consumer price inflation. 3% inflation. A couple of other things that kind of stuck out to me as interesting figures, again, more kind of macro level. So Beijing's per capita GDP has increased to about $24,000 as of 2020, up from about $18,000 in 2015. So quite impressive growth rate, although not as fast as it would have been, say, 10 or 15 years ago. And also a quite impressive average, income. I mean, that $24,000, I think, is quite comparable to most, or many European countries, I suppose. So these are the kind of high-level discussions that were occurring at this Beijing Municipal People's Congress. Also at this Congress were a couple of things specifically related to space. And so there was a report, or there was an article released by the Chinese space industry think tank and event organizer Future Space that discusses a little bit more about the space ramifications of this meeting in Beijing. And There's a handful of kind of nebulous, government phrases like promoting high quality development and, developing services that can be used across the Belt and Road and developing the digital economy. But then they also specifically mentioned that Beijing would like to encourage the development of a satellite internet industry and also accelerating development for high-end precision sensors for space and aerospace. And so we have a couple of specifically space industry initiatives that are going to be on the table. It seems certainly over the course of the next year and potentially over the course of the next 5-year plan for Beijing. One last thing to wrap up here, then I'll turn it over to Jean, is that this really dovetails well with what we were hearing from Dong Lu of ComSat in our Dongfang Hour episode 7, when talking about kind of the provincial and city governments and the support that they are offering for certain industries that are kind of national importance. And so in the case of ComSat in our previous episode, they were talking about how they're building a factory in Tangshan in Hebei province, which is about 2 hours from Beijing, while having the management of the company still being in Beijing. So you have a situation where kind of the higher end stuff is going to be happening in Beijing, and then you have these kind of constellations of cities and provinces built around there that are for kind of varying levels of economic activity. So again, it's coming from the capital in China. This is an interesting development. Beijing has its GDP of the municipality is, I had the number earlier. What was it? It was a whopping 3.6 trillion renminbi in 2020. So about $500 billion US. So this is a very big, it's a big economy. It's a big place. And so it's good to have that in one's corner if you're trying to develop a satellite internet infrastructure base, you could say, or industry base, as it were. Jean, anything from you on the Beijing side of things?
Not exactly on Beijing, but you mentioned ComSat and government support. We're talking about satellite internet. And I think one very tangible example of the government supporting the satellite internet part of this new infrastructure policy is the new round of funding that we've seen ComSat raise in the past week. ComSat announced that they had raised something in the order of magnitude of 100 million RMB from the CIIF. So the CIIF is the China Internet Investment Fund. And what that is, I think this is actually what's the most interesting about this piece of news, other than just another round of funding, is that the CIIF is it's a fund that has very high support at the highest level of the government, since it is co-founded by the Ministry of Finance and also the Cyberspace Administration of China. And so they were founded in 2017 with an initial capital of 100 billion RMB, and their initial objective is to support and to develop all the core internet industries. And so what this is you have catchy words, artificial intelligence, cloud computing, big data, machine learning, this sort of stuff. But this is the very first time with this ComSat fund round of funding that CIIF is investing in a space company, and it's definitely no coincidence that it's a satellite manufacturer that's targeting specifically satellite platforms and also terminals on the ground that are dedicated to communication applications. And so I think this is another example of support, not from provincial governments but from the central government, of support of the satellite part of this new infrastructure policy, which is much larger and that includes a lot more things.
True, and a lot more capex as well. So yeah, that's a very good point. And our viewers and listeners this week get 5 news items for the price of 4. That's very kind of you to slip in the ComSat funding round there in the Beijing update. That's all right. So moving on to OneSpace, a company that we have not heard from in a little while, and we had I had almost left them for dead for one, but they had completed a successful re-entry test launch this week of their OSX 6B rocket, and that was on the 5th of February. So the launch took place from, my notes say Northwest China, and I'm going to guess that means Jiuquan, but I don't have it written in my notes, but let's say Northwest China. The test flight took about 580 seconds, reaching an altitude of 300 kilometers. The one highlight that I would mention that I think is quite noteworthy is that the rocket was called the Chongqing Liangjiang Star, which is an homage to the Liangjiang new area of Chongqing. And this is something we've seen before from OneSpace. And so just a little bit of a deep dive into Chongqing and new areas and what does this all mean. So as I had mentioned earlier, Chongqing is one of the 4 cities that has a provincial level city status. So they have a big city government, a lot of power, a lot of autonomy. And within Chongqing, they are building several new districts. Now, most Chinese cities have these new districts, and basically what it involves is finding a large plot of land outside of the city that's being used by farmers and saying, let's turn this into an industrialized or development area or a residential area, whatever we want to do. And so basically you have these different new districts that are oftentimes purposed for different things. And Liangjiang New District is a very, very, very big new district. And I off the top of my head, I don't recall the exact designation that it has, but there are a handful of new districts in China, including like Lujiazui in Shanghai, that have a kind of like national level special new district kind of thing. And Liangjiang is one of them. So this is a very big new district in a city that is 35 million people, and it has its own, well, a provincial level city area that has 35 million people. It's not really one city, but that's another story for another podcast. Digressing, Liangjiang is this new district. The government of Liangjiang has given OneSpace a lot of support in terms of, we don't know if it's direct financial support, but land and other tax incentives can be assumed. And interestingly, OneSpace, either last year or potentially in 2019, they moved their headquarters from Beijing to Chongqing. And this is something we've seen with a couple of other companies. I think we mentioned a few weeks ago, Deep Blue Aerospace, that now seems to have potentially co-headquarters in Beijing and Nantong, something like this. So this moving of their headquarters to Liangjiang, to Chongqing, seemingly by it is, because OneSpace is getting support from this city government. And again, this has been reflected in the rocket that they launched being called the Liangjiang Star, or the Chongqing Liangjiang Star. And I guess one last just point, I guess, about the Chongqing industrial base more generally. So Chongqing is about an hour and a half by high-speed train from Chengdu, which is another very big city in southwest China that has seen a lot of city government support for satellite manufacturing and also for things like electronic like payloads and electronic components and ground terminals, this type of thing. There's a couple of very, very good universities in Chengdu, and there's also the CETC, which we have discussed on a couple of different episodes. So, seems like this kind of cluster of companies around Chongqing and Chengdu can chalk up another, small win in their column for OneSpace having completed the successful test launch this week. So, Jean, if you want to take us back from the abyss of provincial level policies and special administrative, zones, etc., do you have any rocket related stuff to talk about from this rocket launch?
Well, to go back on your first point, I agree that I probably thought that as well. OneSpace was left for dead after it's basically they had what happened. Going back to the history of OneSpace, they were a company that was quite visible all the way up until March 2019, where they attempted their first orbital launch of the OSM rocket, which failed. And after that, they went absolutely quiet. There were rumors that core technical team members had left the company, were disbanded, and that after, but also before the failed orbital launch. And I think that these rumors to some extent are true. We have, for example, quite a few second generation launch companies that are actually founded by former people coming from OneSpace. And basically, nothing on the company all the way until September last year in 2020. And we reported about that. We found out, and it was a very low key piece of news, that OneSpace had actually raised a C round of funding from the early investors. And the fact that it was the early investors continuing to invest in OneSpace showed continued confidence in the company and perhaps the modifications of its strategy regarding launch. And among these early investors, there was the Liangjiang district of Chongqing. So that's probably why OneSpace continues to name its rockets, Liangjiang Star. This sort of
those two rivers,
those
two rivers.
Liangjiang meaning two rivers.
I cut you off with my.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that was an inside joke for the Chinese speakers. Yes, indeed. Apologies to any non-Chinese speakers listening.
And I think one other thing that was interesting in the article that they published after the successful suborbital launch a couple days ago was they stressed the value proposition and the business case for launching suborbital rockets. Putting stress on how this, it can really simulate a lot of the the harsh space environment, simulating the vacuum of space, simulating the very harsh temperatures, the hypersonic speeds, the altitude. I mean, the rocket did reach 300 kilometers. So yeah, basically it's nice to see that they're putting interesting to see that they're putting a lot of emphasis on suborbital, whereas I guess that wasn't that much the case back before the 2019s.
Well, and I mean, it's certainly one way of differentiating a little bit. You don't see too many other companies really focusing on that. And I think also it's interesting because I recall, and I could be just completely misremembering, but that would seem unlikely. I recall after their first failure on their website, they like split up their product line into like, purely rockets and kind of more like related products, and even some like was it satellite manufacturing or some ground terminal something that was not particularly related to rocketry even. But yeah, I mean, again, it's and again, I mean, this goes back to what we do say sometimes, that in China, it is rather difficult to start a new space company, but it is even more difficult to kill a new space company. They do not die, and so we should not be surprised, I suppose, by this totally unexpected update from OneSpace, and congratulations to them and to the team at OneSpace. That's a good accomplishment, and we hope to hear more from OneSpace moving forward. It's again this multi-horse race. There's a lot of different horses entering into the year of the ox. So that being said, Jean, do you want to take us to our last piece of news about the Tianwen-1 star Mars mission and some related updates?
Yeah, definitely. I think the Mars missions, not just China's, but coming the other two, it's really going to be the highlight of Q1 and Q2 of this year. So anyway, going back to Tianwen-1, we got the first ever picture of Mars that Tianwen-1 sent back to Earth. So this was an image that was shot, I think it was 2.2 million kilometers away from Mars, which seems far away, but it's actually symbolic of how they're almost there. The image was a beautiful monochrome image that we can see. I'll put up on the YouTube channel. We'll see that it has quite a bit of detail, and the CNSA also updated the image and pointing out the different features that are visible on the picture. So 1.1 million kilometers. That sounds quite far away from Mars, but actually the spacecraft Tianwen-1 is really getting close to Mars and about to get ready to be captured by the gravitational field of the red planet. To give a quick rundown of what's going to happen next. So as a quick reminder, Tianwen-1 lifted off last year on July 23rd on board Long March 5 during the Mars launch window of last year. It then went through 460 or 470 million kilometers all the way up to this day. And today I think today actually is exactly the 200th day since liftoff from Wenchang from July the 23rd. And what it's going to do next is on February the 10th, so just in a few days, it's going to arrive. So what that means is that it's going to fire the main engine of the spacecraft and basically slow down sufficiently to be captured by the red planet's gravitational field, and this will put the spacecraft in a very highly elliptical orbit, so with a periapsis of 400-ish kilometers. Tianwen-1 will stay in this first elliptical orbit for about 11 days, after which it will do some maneuvers to insert itself into a lower orbit around 260 kilometers, I think, of periapsis. And this will be an observational orbit. So Tianwen-1, so altogether, the orbiter, the rover, the landing module, all these will orbit Mars for 2 to 3 months and basically observing and taking pictures of the potential landing sites, and after which the lander will separate and begin the descent phase onto Mars. And so that, based on what we've seen previously, this should be happening around May, although there are rumors also saying that this could happen at the end of April, and that would coincide actually quite nicely with China Space Day, which is on the 24th of April. And so, yeah, basically, we're going to have a lot of excitement in the coming 2-3 months. Also, we have the Perseverance mission, the Mars 2020 mission from NASA. That's going to, the landing is going to be kicked off in a few days as well. So I think, it's really cool to have the first image from Tianwen-1, and I am really looking forward to get all these cool Mars pictures from the multiple missions from different countries.
Yeah, watch Tianwen-1 get to Mars and then just have it discover some Dogecoin on the surface. You'd be like, man, Elon Musk has way more powerful rockets than we know about if he's already been up there doing some... What a week. So one last point about Tianwen, because, well, it's just been an interesting week in that regard. So as we mentioned 2 weeks ago on our news update episode 17, there was a naming contest recently for the rover part of the Tianwen-1 mission. And the last couple of weeks, I've been walking around Las Vegas, as I had mentioned, and I noticed two things. So one, a lot of Chinese New Year stuff up and about. Welcome Year of the Ox. We'll have a couple of photos posted. But two, one of the names of this Tianwen naming competition was Qilin, or Kirin, kind of Kirin, sort of a mythical half dragon, half deer. And I noticed in Vegas, outside of the Aria Hotel and Casino, they have two Kirins set up just right there at outside the entrance. And those were not, as far as I know, Chinese New Year decorations. Those Kirin are there year-round in case there's anyone trying to rob the place. There are Kirin there on guard, ready to spring into action. So yeah, just, it brought me back to the Dongfang Hour and just saw the Qilin, and it also made me a little bit less enthusiastic about the name Qilin for the rover. It seems too... how would you say it? It's not abstract enough for me anymore. I just saw a Kirin right here, and I was like, wow, this is fine, but it's no longer a mythical beast. It's a statue outside the Aria for me. So what was my second one that I had mentioned on the other episode? There was Qilin, and there was the I don't think I'm going to come up with it right now. Anyway,
I think it was
so that's all we have.
Was it? Dream Chaser.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Zhui Meng. Yes, you're right. Yeah, wow. Zhui Meng. Yes, Dream Chaser. Absolutely. Well, with that being said, I think that's everything for the Dongfang Hour China Aerospace and Space News Roundup for the week of February 1st to 7th. Jean, anything else from your side? Or are we all good?
I'm all good here.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for watching or listening, and we look forward to welcoming you next week. Have a good day. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Bye.